now. I am standing in my own kitchen at my own birthday party, and my best friend of 19 years is hugging me, holding my face in her hands, telling me she loves me, that I'm her person, that she doesn't know what she would do without me. And I am hugging her back and smiling and saying it too. And I have known for 6 months that she has been sleeping with my husband. Then, 19 years ago, I met Beth in a laundromat in college, fighting over the last working dryer, and by the time our clothes were dry, we were friends. And we stayed friends through every single thing that happened to either of us after. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. She is the godmother to my children. She held each of them on the day they were born. For 19 years, she was my first phone call for every good thing and every bad thing in my life, including, as it turned out, the worst thing in it. This is the story of those 6 months. The ones where I smiled and said nothing and let 2 people who were certain they were getting away with it keep performing love at me across my own dinner table while I quietly, carefully took my entire life back. And it ends with one sentence, said very calmly, that neither of them ever saw coming. Before I tell you, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. If you found out your partner was cheating with your closest friend in the world, could you smile and say nothing for months while you got ready? Or would the truth come out of you the same day, no matter what it cost? Be honest. There's no wrong answer. But the difference between those 2 choices is the difference between how my story ended and how most people's do. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Then let me tell you what Beth was to me, because you cannot understand the silence without understanding what it cost me to keep it. Beth knew things about me my husband didn't. She held my hand in the hospital when my father died. She talked me through the dark months after my second child was born. She had a drawer in my house and a side of the table that was understood to be hers. My kids called her Auntie Beth, and they meant it like blood, because to them, that is exactly what she was. When people asked how we'd stayed so close for 19 years, I used to say, "She's not my friend. She's my family." I said that, out loud, for years, about the woman who was, even then, kissing my husband when I left the room. I want you to sit with the word family for a second, because it matters to everything that comes after. Beth wasn't a work friend or a neighbor I waved to. She was stitched into the actual fabric of my life. She had a key to my house. She knew my coffee order and my password hints and the name of the stuffed animal I slept with as a child. When my marriage had a hard year, she was the one who told me to be patient with Ryan, to give him grace, to remember why I loved him. I took that advice. I worked on my marriage on the counsel of the woman who was dismantling it from the inside. That is the part that took me the longest to forgive myself for, not that I trusted my husband, but that I had handed the keys to my own doubt to the one person actively using them against me. When the betrayal is that deep, it doesn't just break your heart. It makes you question your own judgment about everything, going back years. And rebuilding that trusting myself again turned out to be the longest part of the whole story. Now here is what those 6 months of smiling actually looked like, day to day, because I think it's the part people don't believe is possible. It looked like Sunday dinners where Beth sat at my table and I passed her the salad. It looked like her texting me good morning every day, like always, and me texting back a heart, like always. It looked like my husband Ryan kissing my forehead and asking about my day, and me asking about his. It looked like 19 years of habit, performed perfectly by all 3 of us, except that one of the 3 of us knew the whole thing was theater now. Me. Only me. I was the only one acting on purpose. They thought they were just living their lives. I was the only one who knew we were all on a stage. I learned to do small things to survive it. I learned which of Beth's hugs I could return without my body betraying me, and which moments I needed to be busy in the kitchen instead. I learned to let Ryan kiss my forehead and to think very deliberately about my grocery list so that nothing showed. I told exactly one person what was happening, my own sister, who lived in another city and whom Beth had never been close to, because a human being cannot carry a secret that size entirely alone. And because I needed one voice in the world that knew the smile was a performance. She was my anchor for 6 months. Everyone needs one person outside the fire. Choose them carefully, far from the people involved, and tell them everything. People hear she smiled and said nothing for 6 months, and they imagine it must have been torture every second. And some of it was. But I'm going to tell you the strange truth. Somewhere in those months, the dramatic irony stopped feeling like a burden and started feeling like power. Every time Beth hugged me and didn't know I knew, I held a little more of the truth, and she held a little less of the control. Every Sunday dinner she performed for an audience of one who was no longer fooled was a Sunday she wasted on a play that had already closed. They thought their secret made them powerful, but a secret only has power over the people who don't know it. The moment I knew, their secret stopped being a weapon against me and started being a leash I was quietly holding. They just couldn't feel the tension on it yet. Then, the way I found out was so small it's almost embarrassing. It was a reflection. We were all at a restaurant, me, Ryan, Beth, a few others, and I glanced at the dark window beside our table, and in the reflection. When they thought no one could see, I watched my husband's hand find my best friend's hand under the table, and I watched the look that passed between them. It lasted exactly 1 second, and neither of them ever knew I caught it. It explained everything. The strange new distance in my marriage, the way Beth had gotten almost too attentive lately, too kind, the way guilty people do. 1 second, in a window, and 19 years and a marriage rearranged themselves in front of me. It is a strange thing, how the body knows before the mind agrees. In that 1 second, before I had consciously decided anything, I felt my face go calm, not shocked, not crumpling, just smooth and pleasant. The way it goes when some deep survival instinct takes the wheel and says, "Not here, not now, not in front of them." I have thought about that a lot since. I think some part of me, the part that had spent 19 years reading Beth and 8 years reading Ryan, had already suspected something, and had been quietly waiting for proof so it would know what to do. So when the proof came, the plan was almost already there. I didn't decide to be calm. Calm arrived first, like it had been standing by. I want to tell you I reacted. I didn't. I looked back at my menu and asked if anyone wanted to split a dessert. Because in that 1 second I understood something with perfect, icy clarity, and it became the rule I lived by for 6 months. The moment they knew that I knew, I would lose every advantage I had, and they would get to control the story. Right then, in that restaurant, I was the only person at the table holding the truth, and I decided I was going to hold it until it was the most useful thing I had ever held. If your stomach is in a knot, imagining smiling through that dinner, do me one quick favor before I tell you what the 6 months were really for. Tap like and subscribe to the channel. I'm not asking for nothing. These calm, slow burn revenge stories get buried by the algorithm unless people actually engage, and your one tap is the only reason the next one reaches a woman who is, tonight, holding a truth she isn't ready to say out loud. And believe me, what the silence let me do is the whole reason this story ends the way it does. And I want to say something to anyone watching who has just learned that the 2 people they trusted most are the ones who hurt them. The instinct to explode is not wrong, and it is not weakness, it is love and grief looking for somewhere to go. But I want you to know there is another option, and it is available even when you feel powerless. You can choose when. You don't have to react on their timeline, in their moment, in the scene they're braced for. The truth belongs to you now, not to them. and you get to decide when and how to set it down. That single shift from reacting to choosing is the whole difference between getting hurt and getting free. It was for me. 6 months felt like forever. It was the most powerful 6 months of my life. Now, so what does a person actually do with 6 months of silence? She does not waste it. She gets ready quietly, completely, and so well that by the time anyone realizes there was ever a war, it is already long over and the winner has already gone home. But first I had to be sure, because a reflection in a window is not proof, and I am not a woman who burns down 19 years on a glimpse. So over the first few weeks, I paid attention the way I never had before. And the truth, once I started looking, was not hard to find. It never is. Because people who feel safe get careless. The shared accounts told part of it. Their phones told more. In the small ways, phones betray people who've stopped being careful. And the timeline told the most painful part. This was not new. It had been going on for over a year. A year of Sunday dinners. A year of good morning texts. A year of Auntie Beth. A year of her drawer in my house. I sat with that number for one long night, and I let myself feel all of it, exactly once, all the way to the bottom. And then I closed it like a door, and I started to plan. That one night of feeling it, I want to be honest about it. Because the silence afterward only worked because I gave the grief its hour first. I did not skip the pain. I sat on my bathroom floor at 2 a.m, the same floor where Beth had once sat with me through my worst night. And I let myself cry for the marriage. And then, harder, for the friendship. Because here is the thing no one tells you about this particular betrayal. Losing the husband hurt, but losing the best friend was the wound that wouldn't close. A husband you can imagine replacing. A 19-year friend who knew every version of you since you were 20? There is no replacing that. I grieved her like a death. That night. Because in every way that mattered, she had died. The Beth I thought existed had never existed at all. 19 years of a person. And I had to bury all of it in a single night on a bathroom floor, quietly, so that no one would hear and no one would know to wonder why. And then the sun came up, and I washed my face, and I became the calmest, most patient version of myself I have ever been. The grief didn't go away. I just gave it a job. Now, the first thing the silence bought me was clarity about money. Because love is love, but a life is also a set of arrangements, and I intended to keep mine. I went quietly to a lawyer, and she told me 3 things I have never forgotten. The first, I was in a far stronger position than Ryan understood. Because I had always been the careful one with our finances and our home, and the documentation favored me in ways he had never bothered to learn. The second, nothing I had found needed to be deployed in anger. It needed to be organized, dated, and ready, so that when I chose to move, there would be no fight, only a conclusion. And the third thing she said, quietly, the thing that became my whole strategy, you don't owe them a reaction. The longer you stay calm, the more time you have to make your exit clean. Let them keep believing the play is working. Then close the curtain when you're ready, not when they are. She said one more thing that I wrote down and kept on my phone for those 6 months, where I'd see it every time the silence got too heavy. She said, reaction is what they're prepared for. They have already imagined the screaming wife, the broken-down friend, the scene at the dinner table. They have rehearsed how they'll comfort each other after it, how they'll tell the story where you were too much and they were just 2 people who fell in love. Don't give them the scene they've rehearsed. Give them a conclusion they never wrote. That was it exactly. They had a script for my pain. They had no script at all for my patience. Then, and here is where the second betrayal surfaced, the one that turned my grief into something colder and clearer. Because Beth was not only my friend. Over the years, our lives had grown financially tangled, the way they do with people you trust completely. There were small loans, shared arrangements, a habit of mixing our money the way we mixed everything. And as I went carefully through 6 months of records, I realized that the affair was not the only thing the two of them had been quietly building. They had been imagining a future. One that involved my home, my comfort, the life I had built with Beth simply sliding into it, into my chair, at my table, with my children calling her something other than auntie. The woman who said she didn't know what she'd do without me, had it turned out, worked out in precise detail exactly what she'd do without me. She'd slide into the empty space I left and call it love. She'd take my place, my chair, my table, and eventually, she imagined, my children's trust. That realization changed something fundamental in how I felt about the silence. Up to that point, I had told myself I was staying quiet to protect myself and my kids and to prepare a clean exit. All true. But when I understood that Beth had not stumbled into loving my husband that she had, on some level, wanted my life, my chair, my family, and had been patiently moving toward it, the silence stopped feeling defensive and started feeling exactly right. Because you cannot out-scheme a schemer by screaming. You out-scheme them by being quieter and more patient and more prepared than they ever imagined the trusting, oblivious friend could be. They had spent over a year underestimating me, treating me as the warm, easy Mark who would never see it coming. I decided to let them keep believing that, right up until the second it cost them everything. My silence wasn't me failing to fight back. My silence was me fighting back in the one language they'd never think to listen for. Now, so I used the silence. Over those months, smiling all the while, I made myself untangleable. I quietly separated every financial thread that connected me to Beth, paid off and closed what needed closing, and documented every one so that there would be no leverage left. No shared anything for either of them to stand on. And I want to be clear, the way I always am, I never did a single thing I wasn't entitled to do. I didn't drain anyone, didn't forge anything, didn't take what wasn't mine. The whole power of the silence was that it kept me clean while it gave me time. Everything I closed was mine to close. Every record I kept was mine to keep. When you are the wronged person, the most important discipline in the world is to stay the wronged person all the way to the end, to never hand them a single thing they can point at and say, "See, she's just as bad." I gave them nothing. I stayed spotless. And spotless, when the truth finally lands, is unanswerable. I moved my own savings into accounts in my own name. I made sure my home was protected exactly as the paperwork allowed. And I let my lawyer prepare everything, the divorce, the clean lines, the quiet conclusion, while I poured Beth a glass of wine at Sunday dinner and asked about her week. Then, the hardest part was the children. Because whatever Beth was to me, she had been real love to them, and I would not turn their world into a war zone. So part of my silence was for them 6 months of keeping their life steady and ordinary while I built, behind the scenes, a future where the adults who lied would face the consequences and the children would barely feel the ground shift. That patience was not weakness. That patience was the most maternal thing I have ever done. I planned for them, too, in those months quietly, without their knowing. I made sure that whatever happened to the adults, my children would not lose every anchor at once. I lined up the support they'd need, kept their routines sacred, protected their schools and their friendships and their sense that home was safe. People imagine revenge as a fire. Mine was the opposite. Mine was a woman walking very slowly through her own burning house, calmly carrying out everything that mattered, one armful at a time, before she let anyone see the smoke. The kids never saw the smoke. That was the whole point. The day it all came out, their lives wobbled for a moment and then steadied, because I had spent 6 silent months building the floor they'd land on. Now, there was one moment, in month 5, when I nearly lost it. Beth was at my kitchen counter and she said, out of nowhere, with tears in her eyes, "I need you to know you're the most important person in my life. I would never let anything come between us." And she meant me to be comforted by it. And I stood there holding a knife over a cutting board. And the rage that went through me was so total that I had to turn to the sink and run the water and breathe. But I did not turn around with my face wrong. I turned around smiling, and I said, "I know, Beth. Me too." Because I was 5 months in and I was not going to lose the whole thing in the last act over a sentence. That was the closest I ever came. After that, I knew I was nearly done, because I could not keep being that calm for much longer without it costing me something I didn't want to pay. There is a limit to how long anyone can hold their hands steady over that much grief, and I had found mine. So I stopped extending the timeline. I told my lawyer I was ready. I picked the date. And for the first time in 6 months, knowing the end was coming, I slept through the night. Then and now, finally, becoming one. The night it ended was my birthday party, the one from the very beginning of this story. I had planned it for weeks. Everyone was there, our friends, our families, Ryan beaming as the devoted husband, Beth glowing as the devoted best friend. Both of them performing their love at me one last time in front of everyone, with no idea that the curtain was already coming down. I waited until the moment was warm and full, until the candles were out and the wine was poured and everyone was happy. And then I did not make a scene. I did not announce anything to the room. That was never my style, and it was never the plan. Instead, near the end of the night, I asked Ryan and Beth to come into the kitchen. Just the 3 of us for a second. And when the door was closed, I handed each of them an envelope. Ryan's held the divorce filing. Already prepared, already complete. Beth's held a single page, a clean final accounting of every financial thread I had quietly severed between us, with a short note that said our arrangements, like our friendship, were now closed. And then I said the only sentence I had been saving for 6 months. I looked at the 2 of them, calm as still water, and I said, "I've known since the restaurant." That was 6 months ago. Every dinner, every good morning text, every time you told me you loved me, I knew. I just wanted to be ready before I let you stop pretending. I will never forget their faces. Because it wasn't only the affair landing on them. It was the 6 months. It was the sudden, sickening recalculation of every warm moment, every hug, every "I love you." Realizing that I had been there the whole time, awake, watching, while they thought they were getting away with it. The affair humiliated them for one moment. The 6 months of my silence humiliated them backward, through half a year of their own performance. There is no recovering your dignity from that. There is no spin. I watched it happen in real time on their faces, and I will tell you, it was not the affair reveal that broke them. They had braced for that one possibility for over a year. It was the date. 6 months. I watched Ryan's mind start sprinting backward through every dinner, every kiss goodnight, every ordinary Tuesday, recalculating each one with the new knowledge that I had been awake inside all of them. And I watched Beth realize that the day she'd held my face and told me I was the most important person in her life, month 5, the kitchen. The tears I had already known for 4 months, and had smiled, and said me too. You cannot unknow that you were performed for. It curdles every memory at once. They didn't just lose the future. They lost the past, too. Every warm moment of it retroactively turned into evidence of their own foolishness. That is what silence does that screaming never can. Screaming gives them one bad night. Silence gives them a permanent, unfixable revision of everything they thought they'd gotten away with. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of them. I told them the party was over, and that my lawyer would handle the rest, and I opened the kitchen door and went back out to the people who actually loved me, and I let the 2 of them stand there alone in the kitchen. in the wreckage of a future they had quietly built inside my house. Without me, while I smiled and passed the salad. The divorce was clean, because 6 months of quiet had made it clean. Ryan left with what was actually his, which was not much, because I had spent half a year making sure of it without ever raising my voice. Beth lost more than the affair cost her. She lost the entire life she'd been quietly auditioning to steal. And she lost it in front of a social circle that had known us both for 2 decades and now knew exactly what she'd done. I didn't have to tell that circle anything. By the way, that's the other quiet mercy of doing it the calm way. I never sent a single group message, never posted a word, never made a case to anyone. I simply lived my life, with my head up, surrounded by the people who'd always loved me. And the truth traveled on its own, the way truth does, because Ryan and Beth could not explain a clean divorce and a closed friendship and a woman who was suddenly, visibly fine. People are not stupid. They watched the calm, dignified one keep her life and her friends and her home, and they watched the other 2 slink off, and they drew the only conclusion that fit. I never had to say a word against Beth. I just had to be okay in front of everyone, and let her absence say it for me. 19 years of being like family turned, in one closed-door conversation, into being the woman no one would seat near the host again. They did not, in the end, get to be together in any way that resembled the future they'd imagined. Because the future they'd imagined was built entirely on a life that was mine, and I quietly took it back before they ever knew it was gone. And if you'll let me leave you with one thing, not as someone who got revenge, but as someone who lost a husband and a 19-year best friend in the same single second, in the reflection of a window, it's this. When someone betrays you that deeply, the loudest thing you can do is almost never the strongest. Silence, when it is chosen on purpose and used with care, is not weakness, and it is not denial. Sometimes it is the sound of a woman quietly getting her whole life back before the people who took it even know she's moving. Protect your peace. Protect your children. Get ready before you get even, every single time. And know this, the people who truly love you will never make you the last to know your own life. Only the ones who are stealing it ever do. There's one more thing though. About 3 months after the divorce, Beth's sister, who I'd also known for 19 years, reached out to me, and she told me something about how the affair had really begun, and why Beth had chosen Ryan that reframed the entire 19-year friendship in a way I am still not over. What she told me, and what I finally understood about a friend I thought I knew completely, is a story entirely its own, and it might just be the most satisfying one yet. It's right there on your screen. You are going to want to see how that one ends.